Hi, my name is Luis Fonan, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Duolingo.
Duolingo co-founder Luis Fonan has a PhD in computer science. But as a CEO, he doesn't see himself as a numbers guy.
I just want to spend my time building a product. That's what I'm good at. I'm not necessarily good at accounting.
El niño.
As the product he'd created grew into the world's most popular language learning tool, Fonan knew he had to turn his attention to strengthening the company. That's where Matt Skaruppa came in.
When I came to Duolingo 5 years ago, my job was to get the company ready to go public.
The CFO helped pull off the IPO.
And then it became a translation exercise. It was translating the company to investors, in particular, Luis to investors, and then translating what investors in that world meant for the company as we went public.
Translation is central to Duolingo's business, and it's also important to its internal culture.
And as you translate them and as you see how other people translate them, you start learning.
Though Fonan spent decades in academia while Skaruppa forged a career in finance,
I want to do that.
No, I'm excited. It's like the marquee event.
they've learned to speak the same language.
She's been a trooper.
She's been awesome. Yeah, she's hilarious.
Luis is singular. He's what attracted me to the company. The reason we stay aligned is we talk all the time, and we both like simplicity and clarity of thought.
Like, it's about the students and giving the students a chance to...
But you were a student.
I know.
Luis, because he's so brilliant, most of the financial things that we've had to discuss are very intuitive to him.
There are a few things that I care about when it comes to finances and kind of investor relations, but most of the stuff in terms of accounting or dealing with public market investors or the stock market or stuff like that, I want to be shielded from it. He does a great job with that.
From its offbeat mascot to its gamified curriculum, Duolingo leads with attitude. To quote its corporate handbook, the company is quirky. While it's focused on goals that any CFO would find familiar, it's determined not to take the same old route to reach them.
CFOs aren't traditionally quirky. Talk a little about the cultural shift to a job like this, where the culture is really one that, as is described in the handbook, is unhinged.
I try to be quirky, like Duolingo. Most of my presentations internally start with a Taylor Swift lyric. But I think the role of a CFO in any public company is about bringing clarity. It's not about selling, it's about here's what's actually going on and here's why it makes sense. April is going to have to be really efficient. I think we're set up well for that. Testing is on track and on budget.
He's fun and quirky in a CFO kind of way, which is actually exactly what we want. If we had hired somebody that was similar to me, this company would not be performing the way it's performing.
Duolingo at its core is this amazing machine of learning. We envision this limitless future that we want to build. And my job is to make sure everyone knows where we're standing today. What are our resources and capabilities today? And then strategically, how do we link those together? And I think that is really the basis of what a strategic CFO is, and that's what the role has become.
Duolingo runs on the freemium model. It offers language lessons at no cost, but adds features for people who pay. Free has translated into robust annual user growth. Converting free users to paid subscribers is the ultimate goal, but it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Our free product is essentially our growth engine. I mean, it's the way we grow is people use it for free, and then they tell their friends, and then maybe one of their friends will subscribe. So I don't want to screw up the free product. I don't think it'll ever be the case that the majority of our users are paying.
The conversion piece is one part of a relatively complex system. Luis talks about our business as having 3 almost equal tranches. We have a group of folks who are trying to bring users to the platform and then engage them enough to keep them on the platform. We have a group of people who are trying to make sure that it is teaching really effectively all of the things we're trying to teach. And then it has a group of people who are trying to convert free users to paid. And they're about a third in terms of headcount and really investment. Got way focused on conversion at the expense of growth or learning. The whole system would not grow as nicely as we want.
So far, the company's kept its subscription menu fairly simple. offering 2 tiers as well as a family plan.
Would there be a way to bring in more subscribers or bring in more revenue if you offered more than 3 different tiers?
The way we pass people through the funnel is complex. It is based on your usage experience, where you're at in your learning journey, where you're at geographically. We're trying to optimize for something called the lifetime value of the subscribers on the platform. We're trying to nudge people towards a product that will deliver them value and be higher LTVs.
That nudge towards Duolingo's Premium Max tier got a lot more emphatic in late 2024, when the company used AI to give its character Lily the power of conversation.
Introducing Video Call, a new way to practice your language skills.
How's your job going?
Hey Lily, it's going super well.
What's your favorite thing about work these days?
Probably my colleagues. I really like working with them.
That sounds like my nightmare.
We didn't have that core feature that we could organize behind until the fall of last year when we launched Video Call.
안녕하세요. 잘 지냈어요?
That feature sold itself. You didn't have to explain to someone what it was. It was very clear. You're going to have a video conversation with someone. And that is when we saw max penetration really take off.
You've been talking about studying, working with AI for, at this point, more than 2 decades.
Yes.
How groundbreaking is Lily?
I would have never imagined 10 years ago that it was going to take only 10 years to get to a point where you could practice an actual conversation with an AI. In fact, 4 years ago, it was out of the question.
Salut, comment ça va?
Bien Lily, comment ça va?
Lily's conversations are enabled by commercial AI programs. So while an increase in Max subscribers drives gross revenue higher, added expenses eat into margins. It's a burden Duolingo's willing to bear for now, and they insist it'll soon get lighter.
We are really excited that we're at a moment in time where, as one of our financial analysts pointed out, we might be the best example of a company that's monetizing AI and consumer internet right now. Our thesis remains intact that on a per unit basis, the cost of the AI intelligence will come down over time.
In the last 18 months, we've seen AI prices come down precipitously. Foundation models are becoming the fastest depreciating asset class on the market right now. So look at OpenAI's GPT-4 as one example. Over the last 2 years, you've seen prices come down 90% for that model. That's cost per token, so cost to run that model. We're seeing the closed source and open source gap close, which makes these models a lot more accessible. So we're really seeing a perfect storm for AI models right now.
The main goal is to make Max and Lily even more engaging. And we think if we do that, we have a big opportunity to monetize that over time.
Duolingo preserves capital to invest in AI by keeping marketing costs to a minimum, relying on word of mouth and social media instead of paid advertising.
I'm reporting live from Duolingo's funeral.
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
We just did this campaign where our mascot died. That campaign cost us like $10,000, like nothing. It cost us nothing.
I wanted to see how many of you would bother to bring me back to life.
We inject ourselves into the social conversation across a variety of platforms across the world in a way that's authentic and organic. There's a couple things you don't actually see in our social media. You don't see a call to action. There's no subscribe now, because we're really just trying to be authentic in a conversation.
So if you don't have a call to action, how do you quantify the impact of a campaign like that? How do you measure it?
We have a variety of techniques, survey techniques and other attribution techniques to do it. I mean, we saw for when Duo faked his death, you can track it from number of interactions on social platforms. In this case, it was over 1 billion. Once we get that user, we are able to offer them multiple bites at the apple to subscribe because they stay around for a long period of time and they leave the platform and come back. So we are going to have a long-term relationship with this user. The marketing efficacy is over a really long period of time, which is very valuable to us.
Duolingo's strategy is borne out by its dominant share of the language learning market. And that market is projected to boom over the next decade, giving the company even more territory to penetrate.
This is a really huge potential market. If you look at just language learning in general, 80% of the spend is people who are learning English. It's under 50% of the spend for us is learning English. So there's a large gap there that we can fill. So big opportunity.
One tool to take advantage of this opportunity is the Duolingo English Test, or DET. It's Duolingo's third largest revenue stream, and it underpins a long-term plan.
The DET is a very important part of our strategy to become the proficiency standard.
We help certify formally for hundreds of thousands of people every year that their English proficiency is good enough to go to college or go to university somewhere in the world. And if we can then integrate that into the app, and we've started to in some courses where we've put a Duolingo score, then you can merge these two ideas and you can help become the proficiency standard. You want to eventually imagine a world where people are walking around not saying, I'm an intermediate Spanish learner or I'm a beginning French learner. You want to walk around saying, I'm a Duolingo 14. I'm a Duolingo 26. I'm a Duolingo 77. I'm a Duolingo 115. If we are able to achieve that level of being the standard, we think there's tons of business upside to that effort.
Coming up, Lily may be the flashiest example, but Matt Skaruppa tells me Duolingo's investments in AI are bringing all kinds of returns.
We are using AI in ways to create massively more content than we could otherwise create.
And Duolingo's patient approach to growth sometimes makes investors anxious. That's a feature, not a bug.
We have an operating principle that's in our handbook. Take the long view.
This is Bloomberg.
That's the gift, I think we're giving ourselves.
When you ask Duolingo CFO Matt Skaruppa about his career path, he doesn't just tell you where he's worked and when. He explains what he's learned at each stop along the journey, starting with his college degree in chemical engineering.
Chemical engineering taught me a ton about systems. They're all complex, and when you pull on one thing in a system, it's attached to everything else you find. And then after chemical engineering, I went to Bain, the consulting firm, where I learned the power of pure strategy, but really about how you communicate strategy and how important that communication is to the actual strategy. Following that, I went to KKR, where I learned from the best capital allocators in the world. And what I learned from them was how you identify and then double down on durable businesses. At Goldman, I learned a ton about how you structure deals to maximize option value. And when you put all of that together, that's a pretty good CFO skill set. But it came about because I kept putting myself at the bottom of steep learning curve. And then I found myself at Duolingo at the bottom of another steep learning curve in a company that loves putting people at the bottom of steep learning curves.
Skaruppa also found himself in Pittsburgh, a city historically known more for steel than software. He's come to believe that physical and cultural distance from Silicon Valley has played a role in Duolingo's success.
Luis founded the business here and took a long time before they even thought about monetizing. That only happens in a place where you're removed from the social pressure or you're removed from the way of doing things that everyone else does. And I think that in a complex system, which our business is, where we have a bunch of process improvements that we make, being separated and far apart from the coasts initially really helped us develop that process and compound those gains over time. And I think that's a competitive advantage for us.
CEO Luis Von Ahn says he considers Netflix and Spotify models for Duolingo to emulate. But with its emphasis on design, imagination, and style, there's more than a little Apple in Duolingo's appeal to consumers.
Engagement is the number one thing we try to solve for, and we try to do that by making the app joyful and fun. And we have a huge swath of really talented designers that enable us to iterate on that product every day and make it 1% better.
Creating something like that costs money. How do you do that? How do you make it engaging? How do you continue to iterate without breaking the bank?
The reason we have the business model we do in part is so that we have a good amount of cash flow that comes off the business to reinvest in design, because it really is a cycle. We think that the more we can put into making it a wow experience, a truly delightful product experience, the more people will stick around and the more chance we'll have to get more subscription dollars. And once we get those dollars, we can then reinvest in doing that. So it truly is a cycle over time.
Duolingo has increased headcount every year since its IPO, and design is the company's second largest department behind engineering. It's determined to preserve a brand and culture based on joy and connection, even with its AI-first approach to content creation.
We are using AI in ways to create massively more content than we could otherwise create. Humans are still in the loop. We're still making sure that has an excellent quality to it, but we're about to release about 148 new courses that we weren't able to even think about creating if we didn't have AI available. So it essentially lets us keep costs flat and by orders of magnitude increase the content we create.
How are you using AI when testing the product right now?
We do dog food the lessons a ton internally with our employees, and everyone's expected to use the app and find bugs and do all of that. There are going to be advances in AI that help us to write code better, test that code, these type of things, and we'll implement those over time as well.
Do you A/B test with users too, who are outside the company?
Oh, for sure. The biggest way we improve the product over time is through our A/B testing methodology, and it's really the core process moat that we have. And what that means is that we are making small changes, testing them on subsets of our users, seeing what wins and what doesn't, and then implementing what wins.
With AI driving faster creation of new content, Duolingo now has more courses to attract more users in more countries.
We think that we can grow in almost every country in the world from here. There are about 2 billion people in the world learning a language. A lot of them are learning English. And we've gotten even better at providing more advanced English content over the past couple years, especially as AI has helped us create that content.
What about China?
China's been a really rapidly growing market for us. It's been relatively small in terms of total number of users, but it is an enormous language market. Not only are there a lot of English learners in the market, but they spend a lot of money on English learning.
Advanced learners outside the US are more likely to become paid subscribers. But that creates pricing challenges, since AI features like Lily cost more, and users in many countries can't easily afford rates charged to US customers.
We try to adjust the price to be more comparable to like a GDP per capita ratio. And then for Max in particular, we set a floor where we want to make a good gross profit dollars per Max subscription. Over time, as the cost of Max comes down, we would expect to have more ability to experiment with the Max price and potentially lower it in regions where that made sense.
Coming up,
Feliz Viernes.
Duolingo has nothing against making money. So why do they refuse to show their users more advertising?
When we went public, Luis mentioned that at any given moment, we could dramatically increase our revenue at the drop of a hat by adding more ads. And then he said that he didn't want to do that.
This is Bloomberg. Duolingo has steadily grown both users and revenue since going public in 2021. It's turned a profit in each of the last 2 full years. The company's stock has surged in the last 12 months, even as it resists the urge to pull some levers that would drive short-term growth.
There is a nice confluence between the long-term investor and what we're trying to do. We have an operating principle that's in our handbook, take the long view. When we went public, we put a timeline up on the screen for the whole company in an all-hands meeting. And that timeline went from founding to 100 years out. And the IPO was one dot in 1 year on that timeline. And we tried to orient the employees to, this is a wonderful event, this IPO. It's fantastic, but it's a moment in time on a very long journey.
This is a company that you want to exist in 100 years.
We do.
Wall Street doesn't think in.
No, they think in like hours. Yeah. And what I've learned of Wall Street, and particularly Wall Street investors, when they say they are long-term investors, that means they'll keep your stock for like a month. There has been one instance where I did something that was just for short-term stock, and I felt so bad about it that I don't think I'll do it again.
What was that?
There was one quarter, a few quarters ago, we were not going to beat the quarter. We were gonna probably just hit it, and so far we beat every quarter. So we were all like, wait, what? Our perfect record. We're like a 4.0 student that is gonna get a B for the first time. This is not good. And I decided that for a short period of time, at the end of a lesson in our app, we would show 2 ads instead of 1. Turns out that by itself was good enough to beat the quarter, but it's bad for the product, it's not good, and after that, I'm never doing that again.
While Duolingo's overall revenues have soared, revenue growth from ads has been relatively modest. Wall Street may just have to learn to live with it.
You must be tempted to just show a few more ads and bring in some more revenue from that free tier.
When we went public, Luis mentioned that at any given moment, on any given day, in any given hour, we could dramatically increase our revenue at the drop of a hat by adding more ads. And then he said that he didn't want to do that.
Do you foresee that that view shifts at all in the next few years? I mean, there was a time when people said Netflix will never do ads.
I've learned enough as a public company CFO to never say never. However, Luis is the most hands-on CEO I've ever seen or worked with. While he's around, I do not see that changing.
But there are some changes to keep an eye on. Duolingo has offered lessons in music and math since 2023, and it's now rolling out a chess course.
We really do want to be an app that teaches, most subjects that take a long time to learn. We're not going to be teaching you how to fix your faucet. That you can probably do on YouTube. But if it's something that takes a long time to learn, we want to be teaching that to you. We're starting with math and music, but we're probably going to add many, many other things.
It makes a ton of sense that math and music are the next adjacencies that we would look at, because they're very much in keeping with how you learn a language. You have to repeat it frequently, and it follows a set of structured rules.
How much capital will they require to be built out?
It will depend on how much they grow and how successful they are, and we'll make those decisions over time iteratively. What
about margins? How should investors think about margins on those products?
They're part of the main app, and that means they're part of the main subscriptions, and so their fundamental base is not a different margin profile. Some of them will have different marginal costs or this or that, but over time we have been consistent that we like our high gross margin business, and we're going to try to endeavor to keep it.
Matt Skaruppa models Duolingo's first principle: take the long view in everything he does as CFO. So I asked him what he sees when he trains his binoculars on the future.
What's the opportunity in the next decade for Duolingo that most excites you?
To fundamentally make our app much more like a human tutor in your pocket.
What's the challenge for Duolingo that keeps you up at night?
How to keep our employees, who are incredibly talented, incredibly craft-oriented and design-oriented, motivated and excited and engaged in the long-term mission.
How do you see your role as CFO changing over the next 10 years?
I think the role of the CFO is going to change a lot over the next 10 years as we automate so much more of the manual work that goes on. And I think that will free up CFOs, controllers, heads of FP&A to do more high-level strategic thinking. And so the real job will become, how do we make sure we're staying at the leading edge of all of the strategic questions that we can bring our expertise to bear on in the company when we're removed from some of the more manual tasks.
What's the skill set or an area of knowledge that you would advise every aspiring CFO to develop?
If I were not a CFO, public company CFO, in a different life, I would love to have been a poet. And so I think that aspiring CFOs need to realize that they are interacting with humans every day. And humans have a variety of motivations and interests and fears and compulsions. And so I would do anything you could to become better at understanding other people. Poetry is a great way to do that.
Complete this sentence. The hardest part about being a CFO is?
The hardest part about being a CFO is the fact that there are so many tasks and context switches that you have to make, and the job is so systematic that making sure that you're on top of all of that and thinking about it from a systems perspective and not a one-off perspective is the hardest part.
A friend calls you up and says, I've got great news. I've been promoted to CFO. You say congratulations. What's the first piece of advice you give them?
Make sure that you understand the hopes and fears of your CEO, because that's going to determine the strategy, and you need to be aligned with that. And the first part of alignment is understanding.
I'm Tim Stenevik. This is Bloomberg.